The biggest thing I think to take away from all of this is what we're talking about right now. Success is all in how you define it. To see this list, and I've got about 13, maybe 15 things, because I've come up with a few more since I made this list, that I can take away and learn from, whether they're positive or negative or somewhere in between. The fact is, I learned a shitload at that race, and that is worth talking about. Hi. Well, this weekend did not go to plan. I knew going in that I was maybe a little bit undertrained to run the full distance, and that ended up being the case. I ran 62.5 miles. I did about 10,000 feet of climbing, which means I got 100K in, not bad, but I did not complete 100 miles. That is the very first time I've ever DNF'd a race, despite multiple other races where I've crashed, been injured, been cramping severely. This is the first one that I DNF'd. It's tough to deal with and come to grips with, and I don't like saying it, but it was probably the best choice. Stop. Hold on. Spending a lot of time feeling sorry for myself. There's no reason for that. I had a hell of a weekend. It was awesome. I spent about 40 minutes filming a video last week. Now, in my defense, I had just come out of a race weekend. I was still disappointed that I didn't finish 100 miles. I had just put together this set of things that I had learned, and I just was not feeling great about myself when there was no reason for me to feel that way. So let's go back and let's look at some of the things that I actually learned at the Great Divide 100 that made it a success, even though I didn't get to 100 miles. I did 62.5 miles. I climbed almost 10,000 feet in about 16 and a half hours, something like that. Like 14 hours of moving time. That's roughly 14 minutes per mile when I was moving. And even when I was going really slow, like 20 plus minutes per mile, I made that up. That's amazing. And my body did so much in that weekend, and I learned a ton. Instead of why I didn't do well or why I didn't get to 100 miles, let's talk about the things that I did well. Let's talk about the things that I did learn. Let's give water to those things, those positive thoughts that push me forward, instead of those negative thoughts that will wrap themselves around my legs and pull me down. So the first thing I learned, my nutrition strategy worked really well. Part of my journey with chronic kidney disease means that I can't rely exclusively on the things that I used to give me electrolytes, to keep me balanced, and to keep me in the race without cramping. Those things don't work for me in the same way that they used to, or at least they damage my body in ways that I can no longer get on board with. So I needed to make a significant change as of about a year ago, which meant I was completely starting over from a nutrition standpoint. Everything I thought I knew about fueling my body for a race, I had to throw out and start over using none of it. One of the things I have to focus on a lot is not relying so much on sodium as a standalone element. If I'm going to use sodium, I have to use complex sodium sources. So focusing on combinations of sodium like sodium chloride and magnesium sodium, and focusing on potassium, getting in those other electrolytes to make sure I'm refueling my body, I'm not just letting water go straight through me, and I'm avoiding cramping. And even after climbing 10,000 feet for 62.5 miles, I had precisely 0 cramps. That is a huge, huge win. That's a big freaking deal. I am over the moon that it actually worked. Now, there are tweaks that I want to make to that plan. I don't think it's fully formed, but it's a whole hell of a lot closer than I ever expected it to be, particularly when you're talking about things that last that long. My stomach turned on solid food after a while, and after a while, sweet didn't sound very good. It all went down when I made it, and it never did come back up. So that's a huge win in and of itself. My nutrition strategy, my hydration strategy, I feel like I have a very good idea of what I'm going to do when I get to Cowboy because things worked so well at the Great Divide 100. If nothing else came out of that weekend, that by itself is a massive win, and I'm gonna take that with me. Something I probably could have done a little bit better, I started to use my poles on lap 2 and put them away. I don't think I would do that now, knowing what I know. Use your poles early and keep using them. There's no shame in using the poles to go uphill, to go downhill, to keep yourself in rhythm. They are an invaluable tool when you need them. One of the things that my nephrologist, my kidney specialist, suggested to me was that I take magnesium tablets with me and break off a little piece of them and chew that and swallow that with water instead of taking the full tablet. That's really gross. There's no good way around that. It's just disgusting. It doesn't taste good. The texture is nasty, but it works. And the one thing I learned with that is that I need to get over that gross and suck it up because it made a huge difference for about an hour, hour and a half after I took that, and I should have kept up with it. Shoes. Man, I learned a lot about my shoes. And I feel like I'm talking about shoes an awful lot on this channel, and that's okay because as runners, we go through a lot of shoes. I picked up a pair of Topo Pursuits, which are a zero drop, wide toe box, natural foot shape type platform from Topo. They're their trail shoe. They're not their most rugged trail shoe, but I found them on the members only discount section at REI. They were my size. They had only been worn for a mile. They looked brand new. They were like half off. So I decided I'd give them a shot. So I wore them for the first loop, knowing full well that if something goes wrong with my feet, I still have time and shoes that I know that I'm comfortable with that I can switch into and just ditch the Topos. Well, after lap 1, it's about 15 miles, I had a blister on my second toe at the end that I hadn't felt. So those shoes went out the window. I never did put them on for the rest of the race. In fact, today, a week and a half later, is the first time I've run in those shoes since lap 1 of that race. I really like my Ultra Olympus, and I am going to stick with those until they stop being a shoe that I can rely on to make my foot feel good, to last for several hundred miles, and to get me through races in critical moments. Ultra, if you're listening, please do not fuck up the Olympus. You've done it with a bunch of other models, and I've gotten over that for the most part. I'm begging you, do not fuck up the Olympus. Another interesting takeaway here, a 15-minute nap and mouthwash makes you into a brand new person. Coming out of lap 3, I was dead. I was not feeling like myself, and I needed to take a reset. I needed something to make me feel like I could go back out. And so I thought, I'm gonna try a nap, I'm gonna try mouthwash. It's something I've seen and heard about on YouTube. Maybe it'll work after a little bit of a nap. So I closed my eyes for 15 minutes, rinsed my mouth out with mouthwash, and by the time I hit the trail for loop 4, I felt fresh. So that was a big win for me. To find out that a 15-minute nap and the mouthwash together make you feel like a brand new person out on the trail, something I'm gonna definitely be using when I get to Cowboy. Weirdly enough, I had a real issue with that second toe on my right foot. So you got your big toe and then that second toe. That one in particular, just on the right foot, I think I strained it or something because I had some real pain going uphill with that toe. Now, I've had that happen with my big toe before, and that makes a little bit more sense, right? Because you're using that toe to really push off. Well, my second toe had that issue, and I'm not really sure why or what caused it. And it really hasn't reoccurred, and that's the first time it's ever happened, so I don't really know how much to read into it. But we're gonna do some foot exercises, some toe strengthening exercises, just in case. I just don't want it to happen again. You can deal with so much pain, but why give yourself more to deal with if you can strengthen it ahead of time and be prepared? I know this seems silly, but other people make suffering easier. I ended up walking with a group of a few guys from Ohio, great guys. We got to talking quite a bit, and that made those few miles that we were together click off way easier. Without that, your mind kind of starts wandering, and it's easy to get into this mode of, I'm suffering, I'm hurting, I have a long way to go. What am I going to do? When you have someone else with you to distract you, it makes it considerably easier to suffer. And a crew and a pacer can help with that. Right before the race, I was told about the ADAPT methodology from Jason Koop. And it's a really powerful framework to, in a moment, essentially, take something that is having an impact on you or your race or your day and move past it. I use that framework without even thinking about it. Right? So the first phase is accept, second phase is diagnose, third is, I don't remember exactly. The gist of it is you've got to accept what has happened. You've got to diagnose where you went wrong. You've got to create a plan to move past it, and then you have to execute. You've got to push forward and find a way to correct whatever it is that has happened, whatever the fallout from that might be, and give yourself the best chance possible to move on. This was no more apparent for me than it was when I made a wrong turn. So I made that wrong turn, ended up backtracking on the course, and found myself where I missed the turn. And at that moment, I sat down and put my head in my hands for a couple of minutes, and I was just distraught. At this point, I was 40-ish miles in, and now I'm faced with retracing the steps that I just took for another 1.5 miles. And then I still have another 4 or 5 miles. I figured out I was too busy looking at the scenery and watching a mule deer eat to pay attention to where the flags were. The course was super well marked. It was entirely my fault. And so I had to come up with a plan knowing now I have extra mileage that I have to do because I made a wrong turn. I've got to accept that. I've got to come up with a plan to move on. And I did that. And I did it somewhat successfully. I think at the end of the day, it still probably impacted my decision to DNF. But that methodology is powerful and I do use it even if I'm not putting the precise words to it. And I need to continue doing that and continue building that mental strength to use that methodology again, even without the specific acronym. When things get hard, when shit hits the fan, to move beyond that without getting caught up in it. Camping out by myself the night before was probably not the best idea, particularly when I knew I was not going to be hammock camping and I was going to have to sleep in a tent on the ground. I probably won't make that mistake again, at least not with just a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag in a tent on the ground. At night in particular, I probably will take a headlamp in addition to a waist lamp. I got a Kogala, which was great, worked super well, but the problem is you still kind of get that tunnel vision. Anything beyond the edge of the light doesn't exist, and it gets dark enough that you don't feel like it's there. And it's so weird. It's so hard to describe if you've never been in it before. And particularly when you're out in the woods, in the mountains, in the middle of the night, and you've run past these signs all day that say how wonderful a habitat this is for bears, and you know there have been moose on the trail, and you're seeing mule deer, and you're scaring them away with your poles and waving them around, and where there are prey animals, there are also predator animals. All of those things start to play with your tired mind, then add in the tunnel vision that you have from the light only going so far to the side. Having both the waist lamp and the headlamp would enable me to keep the light on the path where I need it, but also take my headlamp and shine it around into the dark woods where I want to look and know that I'm safe. With a headlamp only, of course, that tunnel vision is a little bit easier to get. You're locked in. You would have to be so focused down on the trail. The moment you look to the side, the trail is now dark in front of you and you can't see what's happening. That's why having both, I think, is probably the right solution for me, is that I can keep light on the trail at all times with that waist lamp because my hips are going to be facing front. Then the headlamp, I can look to the side and spot things that are a little bit outside of what the waist lamp provides. Plus, having that second light source will make it a little easier to see the trail with tired eyes and the contours and the topography that I'm running on, so that I'm not as likely to trip. The biggest thing I think to take away from all of this is what we're talking about right now. Success is all in how you define it. To see this list, and I've got about 13, maybe 15 things, because I've come up with a few more since I made this list, that I can take away and learn from, whether they're positive or negative or somewhere in between. The fact is, I learned a shitload at that race, and that is worth talking about. That's worth remembering. That is success. Went a hell of a long way. I did 100 kilometers. I climbed 10,000 feet. I was on my feet for 16 and a half hours. I did it by myself. There was no crew. There were no pacers. I figured out an awful lot about how I race and what I need to be successful. All of those things make that weekend a success. So what? I didn't get 100 miles. So what? I didn't climb 16,000 feet. I still learned a hell of a lot, and that is what's going to get me through in Cowboy. If I had gone and done 100 miles with no issues and didn't encounter any difficulty and never overcame any obstacles, I don't know if it would have been a success. I mean, we would have called it a success because I hit 100 miles. I hit that marker, that milestone. But would I have learned all of this? Would I have come away with this much energy to carry forward into the next several weeks to get ready for the Cowboy 200, to be able to inform my crew, to be able to inform my pacers, my coach, my family? I don't know. I don't know that I would have called it as big a success as it has been for me. So I'm not feeling sorry for myself. It was still a great weekend. I learned a ton, and I ran a long way. The fact of it is, I still put in a considerable distance and some considerable elevation. I'm done feeling sorry for myself. We've got another race to train for. I've got several more weeks of running to do, some things to learn. We've got some cool things planned in. In the meantime, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do the YouTube algorithm things. If you get value out of this content, please share it with your friends. If you don't get value out of this content, share it with your friends that do. Send it to your friends, send it to your enemies. I don't really care. I'm not that picky. And we'll see you next time.